Hey, everybody. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. It's Erica Washington, the Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada, Make It Work Nevada Education Fund, and your favorite host of Make It Make Sense. Sorry that we missed our last episode. We've had some few changes and we're trying to make things better around here. So bear with us while we're under construction. First and foremost, Black census. As always, we really want our Black community to take the Black census. We've been working with the Black Futures Lab and Alicia Garza on trying to talk to as many Black folks about what they think is the most important issues in their lives. So we want to talk to everybody. We want to talk to rural Black folks, folks who live in the city, folks who live up north. We want to talk to you if, you make six figures, if you have no figures, all the folks. We want to know what is going on, because what we do know is that Black folks are not a monolith and that we all have different issues and struggles, and we want to make sure that we are tackling as many as possible. So take the Black census. You can find it on our website, makeitworknevada.org. You're going to see some billboards around. We're going to be out in the streets collecting Black census. So if you see somebody, make sure you take it. It only takes like 5 minutes. Okay, what's up next? Next week, which is now, I think this week, because we are recording, is Black Breastfeeding Week. Why do we need a week of talk about Black breastfeeding? Because it's not advocated enough for us. And we want to make sure that our children have a great and healthy start. If you are able to breastfeed, and not everyone is, and that is okay. But if you are able to, we want you to feel supported. We want you to feel like you have all the tools and resources that you need. So again, check out our website, check out our social media pages. We've been talking about breastfeeding this whole entire month. We've had Indigenous Breastfeeding Week. We've talked about API breastfeeding. We want everyone to feel like they have resources and that they're celebrated in this time, because it's a beautiful time. I had the opportunity to breastfeed all three of my children. Some were easier than others, but I'll say that I don't feel like I had the support that I needed from medical staff when I was in the hospital and I said I wanted to breastfeed. I don't feel like some family members thought it was a good idea, because it can have a bad connotation for some folks of different generation. And so I want to give you what we didn't have. And what we didn't have was all the support. I didn't even know what a lactation consultant was. And if you don't know what a lactation consultant was, stick around. We're going to have some more conversations around breastfeeding in this episode and in some future episodes. But that's basically someone whose whole job is to make sure you can breastfeed your baby well. Next, what are we talking about in this episode? We're talking about pregnant folks. We're talking about moms. We're talking about families. We're talking about the Pregnancy Worker Fairness Act. It is a current act that is rolling through Congress right now, and we have our delegation, our congressional federal delegation here in Nevada. We have a lot of support from our delegation to support this act. But if you didn't know, in 2017, this is something that was worked on at the state level. So I'm really excited to have a bit of conversation today with a fellow colleague and friend, Caroline. She is from NARAL. NARAL does not stand for anything. I always wanted to stand for something, but it's not an acronym. It's just NARAL. But NARAL is a reproductive rights organization. And so they worked on a plethora of issues here in the state. But one of the things they worked on was the Nevada Pregnant Fairness Act in 2017. So I'd like to invite Caroline Mello Robinson to come on, and let's have a conversation about what the heck that means and why did we need it. Hey, Caroline.
Hey, Erica. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. I'm excited. This is your first time on MIMS. So I want to start with a little bit about who you are and what NARAL is, so people can have a better idea of what the heck you do all day.
Yeah. So my name's Caroline Mello Roberson. I'm the Southwest Regional Director for NARAL Pro Choice America. you're totally right that it doesn't actually stand for anything. It used to many years ago. But NARAL is a national organization that's been around since the 1960s. So we've been around a long time advocating for reproductive freedom. We have 4 issue areas that we advocate in, including safe and legal abortion, affordable contraception, paid time off of work, and pregnancy accommodation in the workplace. We see that as kind of many different ways that folks experience their reproductive freedom at different phases in life. What we are is a grassroots mobilizing organization. So we started in 2016 in Nevada, and now we have 48,000 members across the state of Nevada. We
Wow.
began with 900. And so what we do is advocate in the state legislature primarily to pass legislation to empower Nevadans to make choices that are right for them and their families.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
um, And so let's just dive right into 2017. 2017 was a legislative session, and as most folks know, and if you don't, that's okay too, that our legislative sessions run every other year. So we had one in 17, then another 19, and then 21, and the next one's coming up in 23, which I think personally puts us at a deep handicap for being able to really have some strong policies for folks that they need them, and they need them right now. So, but in 2017, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act came up, and that was something that NARAL, like you were the engine behind that. Can you tell me where that came from and why you thought in 2017 we needed this right now?
Absolutely. Well, I think personally and selfishly, I was pregnant that year. So I was thinking about pregnancy in the workplace. But this was modeled after federal legislation. So the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was a bill that was first introduced in 2012 by Representative Nadler from New York. And so I thought, hey, we don't have a Nevada Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. I think we should try to have one. At that time, I went to who was State Senator Nicole Cannizzaro and is now the majority leader about putting in legislation to codify Nevadans' rights. I will say Nevada is one of 31 states that has their own version of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And so we were able to pass that legislative session. It went into effect on October 1st in 2017. And what it means is that employers have to provide reasonable accommodations for pregnant workers on the job. I've heard stories from many people after this happened. It's always satisfying to have that about the changes that they had at work because of the Nevada Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. They were able to advocate for.
What are some of the changes that folks were able that were more accommodating for them?
Yeah. So, for example, there was one person who was up in northern Nevada where it's pretty snowy, and she wanted to have a parking spot that was closer to be able to get in and out of the building, a dedicated parking space.
Mhm.
And so, using the Nevada Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, she was able to advocate with her employer to have a dedicated parking space. I also heard from workers. A lot of folks that sell cell phones are on their feet all day long and aren't
Mhm.
allowed to have a stool or any kind of thing like that. And so I heard that there were workers who were able to advocate for and successfully get a stool so that they could sit when they were later on in their pregnancy and be able to still do their jobs.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, those are a couple examples.
And what's funny, you say, now they're able to have a stool. These things feel like
Yeah.
just regular things. Like if, someone comes in and you're a manager and they say, you obviously see that they are pregnant and, can they have a stool? And be like, no, it, it boggles my mind, a little bit
Absolutely. I think
that
I always say in a better world, I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't have to advocate for this because it feels so. That's why I love that you called this "Make It Make Sense," right? It feels so common sense to
right.
have these kinds of rights on the job. But folks may not know we have something in Nevada called the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, which helps to enforce these things too. So if anyone is a pregnant worker now and is having a difficult time advocating with their employer, the folks at the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, or NERC, can be helpful with that.
And I think that's really important because I brought that up because a lot of folks will say, well, why do we need that? That feels like a waste of time. Like, why are we spending time and money on making sure pregnant ladies can have a seat? But if we don't, there are folks who just don't have, um, they don't feel like they have the space to complain also because a lot of
Yep.
folks just need their job. And especially if you're pregnant and working, you're working for a reason. You're not working just because you feel like it. Not when you get closer to the end, because no one feels like doing much of anything.
True.
But if you're having to work, having those accommodations, they do feel like common sense and common courtesy. But we also know there are just not a lot of folks who care about those things. Can you tell me about any pushback, if any, that you got around this bill in
Yeah,
2017?
I remember this was also another moment where me being pregnant was really helpful because I started to grow as the session went on. And so I was a walking billboard for the need to
I
have
remember.
more accommodations. But I do remember there having to be a lot of negotiations with the business community around what reasonable accommodations looked like for workers. And I will say that there are things like that, like an employer may ask for a written record from your doctor saying like you are pregnant and you need reasonable accommodations on the job. So just flagging for folks that those were the kinds of things that we put into the bill to give some accountability. But I do remember there being some pushback from folks. But I also remember there being a ton of people who were so in favor of this and who were very proud to advocate as NARAL Nevada members for something like this, because we very much support and want to make sure that people who are pregnant can have the ability to work and work safely.
So as we know in doing this work for so many years, that when we put forth a bill, we want to have all of the things in the bill. We want to make sure every piece covers as many Nevadans as possible. But sometimes, as you said, there's negotiations and you have to take things out. Is there anything now that we need to do to strengthen our Pregnant Workers Fairness Act in this state in order to make it better? Are there things that we can ask our audience to advocate for more of, or even if we need to bring it back in and do some rabble rousing?
I think that's a great question. I feel like there's always more that can be done. To me, one of the things that, and I will say shout out to Make It Work Nevada, that we partnered on in 2019, another bill was around protected time off of work that folks are able to earn. We didn't call them, we called it paid time off, but it really was sick days. But we don't have any maternity leave policy in Nevada that's required for workers. And so for a lot of folks, they have to go back to work pretty much immediately after having a baby. And that is something that I have a lot of compassion for, and something that as Nevadans we should push the state to require reasonable paid time off after you give birth, or if you're taking care of an ailing parent. Even I think that there's that's why I think it's called the family leave, right? There's different
Family.
circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I feel like that would be a huge win for Nevadans, and would allow us a lot more rights on the job. But I also think I'm betting that the folks at NERC have some specific recommendations that they would have to strengthen this so that pregnant workers have more of an opportunity to advocate with their employers for reasonable accommodations. As we all know, some things reasonable to some person is not always reasonable to another, right? So how do we give workers more backup to be able to advocate on the job would be another thing I could think of.
Yeah, you start talking about paid family leave, and you're singing a song I feel like I've been singing for a million years. And it is, we do have some paid sick days, which is different from paid family leave. Sick days is, we always call it sick days, cold leave, long term issues, and that is if you give birth to a child, or if you adopt, or if you become a foster, or if you have to take care of a loved one, whoever that is, whether it's a parent or a cousin. It's up. We don't get to decide, and neither should the state or anyone else. The government should decide who our family is and who we feel like deserves our time and care to take time off of that, because care is it is a job in itself that is obviously not paid for, and it takes such a toll on your life and your body and your spirit and all of those things, but yet it has to be done. If we are a country and a state that cares about family values, then those family values have to include time off to actually give the folks what they need.
Yep.
I want to think about something you said earlier. You said that the Pregnant Fairness Act, Workers Fairness Act, came around the first time in 2012. And here we are in 2022 and still talking about it, not only at state level, but at the federal level. And we're hoping to have some more conversations about what's going on with that act at the federal level. But we know it's still cooking. It has
Yep.
not actually become a thing and has not become a law yet. Why does it take so long for things to happen?
I wish I knew. As you know, I'm a state lobbyist, not a federal lobbyist. So I know that we're going to have some federal reps on who can talk about it. But that was partly why I thought, hey, let's do this in Nevada. I know we could get it done in Nevada, given the legislative makeup in 2017. I wanted to get pregnant workers in Nevada the option to have protections on the job. But really, since 2012, they've been trying and not been successful in moving that legislation forward in Congress. Since 1978, it's been illegal to discriminate against a pregnant woman. But there's a difference between discrimination, obviously, and accommodation, right? Being able to actually make it safe and accessible for folks. And so this is something that it sounds like is stalling out in the US Senate. It looks like it's passed the House a couple of times, and it's the US Senate where there's a need. So, you know that in Nevada, we have 2 federal representatives who I believe would be completely on board with this, but that it would be worth talking to Senators Cortez Masto and Rosen about their position on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. But I'm imagining this is also one of those things that a lot of things get stalled up in the US Senate because it's almost a deadlocked House right now, right? There's not very much room that we have there. But I feel like these are the real world stuff that people really care about. Sometimes I even have a hard time paying attention to what's happening in Congress. It just becomes all like a mess of
No one
what's
wants to watch
happening.
C-SPAN all day. It's not
Right.
exciting, but yes, yeah,
But
it
this is
is
stuff
very
that folks would
difficult.
really wrap their arms around, right? Of course,
Mhm,
everyone has many people have had an experience with pregnancy, right? And would see the need to have accommodations on the job.
mhm, mhm. You're absolutely right. And we have a call into our senators to make sure that they are uh, supporting this and that they will, help call for a vote. Right now, I think they just need to call for a vote. And so, I do urge our audience to call Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen, our senators here, and ask them to call for a vote so that we can move this along. And I know it's not all just on them, obviously, right? We need to figure out some of these other states where we have senators who may be thinking about voting no, and ask them why they don't
Yeah.
like pregnant ladies. Like, what do you got
I
against a pregnant lady? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
They
So,
were all born, right? So
right,
everyone has a
exactly. Why do you
relation.
hate your mama? That's really what I want to ask. So, did you want your mama to have to, work and
That's what I'm
stand up?
saying.
So, hopefully we can get some. I want to make sure we can get some numbers up, but also just do a quick Google search and see where, we need to call and who we need to talk to and ask them why they hate their mom. And I think that might be the next actual campaign. Uh, because we don't want to end up in the Handmaid's Tale. This
We
is,
do not.
and I think what 2020 and past administrations have shown us is that we can become a lot closer to that than I think people actually thought we could. And so if we don't pass these laws, if there's nothing there, the same way with Roe versus Wade, things can change. Things
Yeah.
can be overturned, rights can be taken away. And so we need to do more and not less. And so, one last question for you, ma'am, is for folks who want to get involved, people who want to rabble rouse, maybe come up to Carson City next year for this next legislative session and testify or write some letters and connect a little bit more on advocacy work, especially around women's rights. How would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's great. So we have a website, prochoicenevada.org, and there's an easy way to sign up and become a NARAL member there. We also have a monthly meeting that we do every month. We call it an action council, and it's virtual, so folks can call in from wherever they are in the state, and it's a way for us to gather and connect. Thank you. And then, as you noted, we do these every legislative session, which starts in January. It goes from January to June every other year. And so starting in January, but probably more in February, we'll get a bus going where we go up from Las Vegas to Carson City. Because one of the things that we've seen make a huge difference is having regular folks talk to their representatives about the need for these kinds of bills like the Nevada Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. You'd be surprised, and you're not surprised, Erica, but that your viewers may be surprised at how politicians here, they're so used to talking to lobbyists and special interest, but they're not used to talking to regular folks, and they should be. That's who is the folks getting them elected and should be holding them accountable. And so every month the session will be taking up a bus for folks to come up and meet with their representatives. I would say my other homework assignment, if folks don't know, would be to look up who your state senator is and who your state assembly person is. In my experience, most people don't know these folks, but these folks need to know you and need to know that they're accountable to you. And so a good way to start is by looking them up and making sure that they prioritize these issues in the upcoming session.
I think that's really important. I think that is such an important statement right there. It's like you need to know who your state representatives are, but they need to know who you are. You don't get to represent me and you don't know me and you don't know what the issues are, because they can say that they do, but I've seen it over and over again as someone, as an advocate, that they are tired of hearing from me. They are tired of hearing probably from you and a lot of other people, but we'll tell them things and they'll say, well, I need to hear that from my constituents. It's like, because you don't believe what I said. That's cool. So we're going to have some people tell you what's going on. And a lot of times they will be shocked and appalled that, that everything is just not great and everything is not going the way that it should be. So let people know. And that's the main point of the mission of Make It Work Nevada, is for us to be that conduit so that we can amplify the voices of the community. You are not voiceless. You have a voice. We just want to help amplify it so folks can hear it, so they can understand what is actually going on. And if everything ain't good in the hood, then you need to let them know. And we don't need to keep that to ourselves either, because it's not shameful that we are struggling. It's not shameful that we have to work well into our pregnancies. It's not shameful that that our children don't have enough to eat. This is a systemic problem that is going on across the country, and also here in Nevada. There are so many folks who can't afford rent. They can't afford, proper transportation. The school system sucks. Like, there's so many things, and that's not our fault. That's not an individual fault. It's a collective issue. And so we have to say what the problem is, and we have to say it as loud as possible and not be embarrassed that we don't have enough of something, because it's not all our issue alone. So that's me on my soapbox.
It was a good soapbox.
But I appreciate you, Caroline, for all of the work that you have done since 2016 and continue to do, because it's not easy. It's not easy, and the hours are long, and it can be very stressful, especially when we really want a lot of great things and we get pushed back from so many different areas in the state. And I commend you for this work, and I thank you again for being on Make It Make Sense. Hopefully you will come back again soon, and hopefully folks will connect with you and connect with your organization who care about these issues, and others if they just want to learn more information about other bills that you have passed and things that you'll be working on in 2023. So maybe we'll have a conversation again at the top of the year to talk about what all the things are that you'll be working on.
That sounds great. Thank you, Erica. And I have to shout out your leadership. I've seen Make It Work Nevada grow to being this powerful force for good in the state. And we love partnering with y'all. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I didn't have to pay her for that. All right, folks, this has been Make It Make Sense. We'll be back in a sec. This has been a really great episode for me personally. I have told many of people over the years that I feel very privileged to have this position as executive director of Make It Work Nevada. And because I didn't know that this was a job to be had. I didn't grow up thinking that I wanted to be an executive director of a nonprofit advocacy organization. I didn't know that it existed. And to be able to advocate with and around and alongside Black women around issues that matter to us is amazing, and it is a privilege. It's something that I could have only even dreamed of. And so thinking about something like breastfeeding, it's an important topic, and people always say, I'm not into politics. Politics isn't for me. And I'm always like, politics is in you, whether you want it to be or not. And there's politics included in breastfeeding, as you've just learned. When it comes to having the autonomy and having the space to nurse and to feed your child the way that you would like to, making sure that you're not discriminated against and that you're not harassed for these things. I think about, I've had 3 children, and I think about my oldest. When I decided I wanted to breastfeed, and I was 19 years old when I had my oldest child, and I remember being in the hospital, and I remember saying, I would like to breastfeed. And the nurse was like, really? And I said, yes. And so, they tried to teach me how to help her latch on and how to, hold and do all the things. But at the same time, she was more or less directing me from over there. Literally, I'm in my hospital bed, and the nurse is over in the corner sitting in like the windowsill, and I think she might have been watching the TV. I'm not even sure. And instead of being there next to me and making sure that I was doing it correctly, she wasn't helpful whatsoever. And I think about, my grandparents asking me, why do you want to breastfeed? Why do you want to give the baby no count milk? Can't you afford some milk? Because there's a connotation of being poor in breastfeeding, and not so much as this is the best thing for my child. And so now, some years later, my children are mostly grown adults. My oldest now will be 23 in a few weeks. That I'm hoping that in the future, if any of my children decide to have children of their own, that they have more support. They obviously will have more support from me, but from the community as a whole, and from their partners, from their friends and other family members, but also from the elected officials. We need our elected officials, and we need those folks who are serving us to make sure that they are doing exactly that, that they are serving us to the best of their abilities and making sure that we all have equity, and that we have an autonomy to be able to feed our children in public, at work. We're able to pump or feed our children at work, or take the time off that we are needed so that we can take care of ourselves and our children. And I think those things are really important. And there again, there's politics involved in all those things. And so I want to end here, and I want to say thank you for watching Make It Make Sense. Thank you for being a part of the solution. Thank you for advocating for yourself, advocating for others, and remembering to vote. We have the information right down here below the screen. We are in a midterm year. It is really important. We have folks running for office and running to be reelected, all the way from federal down to the state and local level. And all of these seats matter for all of these issues, including breastfeeding, including the Pregnancy Worker Fairness Act. And I'm hoping soon we'll be able to have some of our federal delegation on to talk about the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. We weren't able for this conversation. They were busy. We had some time constraints with recording. And so, it is what it is. But I know that they care because they're supporting the bill. And I know that they will get back to us as soon as they can. And we want to make sure that you have that information. And so you know exactly what's going on in Congress and what's going on in the Senate, because those things matter and they affect our day-to-day lives. Um, One last thing, the Black census, of course, I'm going to remind you again, please take the Black census. If you identify as Black, African American, please take the Black census and let us know what's going on. Let us know how you feel about those currently serving in office. Let us know how COVID has affected you. Let us know how if monkeypox is affecting you. We want to know. We want to know what's going on, and we want to be able to advocate for those things with you, alongside you, and into the future. So thank you again for tuning in for this episode of Make It Make Sense. My name is Erica, and I appreciate you. Have a great and wonderful day.